All right, patch notes are out, and I went ahead and pulled out all the skill gems that I found interesting. So let's go ahead and get into it. So Arc got a critical strike chance buff, and then I think they added ailments. I'm pretty sure that's the new part here. This ailments for each remaining chain. So you do 15% more damage for each remaining chain, and now it's added ailments. So Ignite Arc is on the table, and the quality adds +1 to chain, which is 15% more damage. Now, Arc was already pretty strong, and then it's a very fun skill to play, and you can use Crest of Desire to pump up the levels. So when you pump up these levels, if you can get all the way up to level 36, which is pretty difficult, 31 is also pretty difficult, but 26 is easily attainable. So if you try to shoot for 26 levels on your Arc, you're going to be having 10 chains, and then that's 15% more damage for each chain. When you hit a single target enemy, that is going to help out your bossing pretty significant. That is a relatively big buff for Arc, and that's why I put it on there. I found it interesting. Now, Armageddon Brand I found interesting just because of the 10% more damage with hits and ailments against branded enemies. And I already played Armageddon Brand Ignite, and I kind of liked it. And now you're doing 10% more damage with hits with Ignite. This is just a 10% more damage buff for Armageddon Brand. And I felt Armageddon Brand was already like almost good enough to be a meta build. And now it's still probably not going to be a meta build, but Armageddon Brand might be a pretty solid pick for Righteous Fire builds. So if you're getting tired of Fire Trap, you could throw Armageddon Brand on, especially for mapping. It's going to be better than Fire Trap because Armageddon Brands can spread around. Now, I found all of the cries changing from increased area of effect to 40% cooldown recovery rate to be excellent. So all the cries are now going to be pretty viable. And I wonder, I didn't check if it included the new cry support. I think it should count for that. And that does a bunch of damage, so that's pretty nice as well. And then General's Cry gets +1 to summon Mirage Warriors. And I already did a Cyclone Shockwave sweep build that was using General's Cry with it to trigger a bunch of sweeps. And that was extremely fun. And getting one more Mirage Warrior to do one more sweep is one more circle. So you got Cyclone, you got Shockwave, you got sweep circles. It's a good time. So I definitely might be trying to do my high cooldown recovery rate Scion. That's a good option. Moving on to Blade Flurry. Blade Flurry now has 5% more damage with hits and ailments per stage instead of 10% increased attack speed. This is pretty huge. 5% more damage per stage with hits and ailments. And you can get, I forget how many stages you get with Blade Flurry. I don't think the gym says it. Let's go ahead and paste this in there. Oh, it's going to want an underscore on that Blade Flurry, isn't it? Blade Flurry. Repeatedly hit enemies in a circle in front of you while channeling, dealing damage to and around them. The damage continually boosts while channeling. You unleash an additional hit for each stage reached once the channeling ends. Requires daggers, claw, or one-handed sword. 20% more damage for each hit. So it's going to be adding 5 more to that. But I don't think it says how many the maximum stages are. I don't see that anywhere in here. Yeah, I don't know what the maximum stages are, but that seems like it's a pretty big damage boost. And so I wanted to call that out. Bladestorm, you get an extra Bladestorm. I've already really liked Bladestorm, and having one more Bladestorm, this is pretty great. Now, Body Swap, I mostly put this on here because you're getting another 4% of your maximum life is extra fire damage. And with the new League mechanic, you got that new node that gives you a bunch of life. And I think life stackers are going to be in vogue this league. And Body Swap Righteous Fire life stackers are probably going to be pretty damn fun to play now because Righteous Fire has been modified slightly. And by slightly, I mean very largely, to where it now stacks more off of your maximum life. So maximum life builds with Body Swap, and then there's that skill that adds physical damage based on your maximum life, and you can add that onto Body Swap. I think Body Swap Righteous Fire is going to be a pretty solid build this league because of this change. Burning Arrow was already really strong. Had a really strong base damage for an arrow skill. I think it's the highest one in the game. And having 20% more damage with Ignites instead of 20% increased fire damage. A Burning Arrow Ignite build is probably on the table now. Before it wasn't quite doing enough damage unless you had a Mirror Tier bow. But with the 20% more damage, I mean, you're definitely going to be easy T16 and some of the easier bosses like Shaper or Elder. Maybe not Ubers, but you're probably going to get a damn good build off of Burning Arrow, and it's going to be pretty cheap as well. Crackling Lance. Quality now provides 10% more damage with hits and ailments per Intensify. And that's pretty good. You get 3 Intensifies. That's 30% more damage with hits and ailments on bosses when you're using Crackling Lance. And I believe there's some things where you can get 4 Intensifies. So that's going to be another 5%. Another 10% on there. So you get a 40% total. Crackling Lance looks like it got a huge buff. This kind of sours my soul that these spells are getting all these buffs when melee has been neglected for so long. And that poor Gladiator, we all thought the Gladiator was going to get reworked, and he's left there, sitting there just like, hey, no one plays me, I suck, help, send some help. And no one's sending help to the Gladiator or all the other melee builds for that. Now Cyclone is one of my favorite skills. I'm mostly putting it on there because I've been complaining about how bad they've nerfed Cyclone. They didn't up the damage, which is, they definitely should have increased damage on here, but they did modify it. So it no longer has first hit deals 50% less damage, and it no longer gains the stages in the same way. And now it has +1 meters to radius per stage, or maximum 3 to 6 stages. I think it's supposed to be 4, and maybe the F got deleted when I pasted it over. It no longer has that. Gotcha. It now has 10% increased area of effect per 0.1 meter of additional melee strike range at all levels, previously 8%. Quality now provides 10% more movement speed instead of 10% increased area of effect. Now, the 10% more movement speed is pretty damn nice because Cyclone is pretty slow when you start casting it, and a lot of people just kind of tap it, especially if you're using Shockwave Cyclone. But to be able to hold Cyclone for the whole map and not lose that much speed is really nice. And I'm hoping this increased area of effect is going to be a lot bigger than we expect, because when you're channeling Cyclone, you can get like 7 stacks. So this modification might actually increase the AoE on Cyclone and almost bring back the dream of having a real Cyclone build again. Unfortunately, the damage of Cyclone is still too low, so the only Cyclone build you can have are Cyclone Shockwave builds. But the dream is almost alive. All they got to do is buff it maybe 3, 4, 5, or 6 more times, or actually address the fact that melee is a little underpowered right now. But that's an interesting change that I know Cyclone's a very popular skill, so I wanted to call it out. You get that more movement speed. Cyclone might be a nice little build for people that want to use a one-click button build. Now, Divine Ire is a huge change. To me, this is a just monstrous change. Now deals 240% more damage with hits per stage, previously 110. So I believe it had 20 stages before. Let's pop Divine Ire in here. So they reduced the stage count, which is actually a good thing, because that way you don't have to charge for quite as long. Divine Ire. I don't see where it says total charges. %50 converted. Damage 5 enemies near you when you gain a charge. More damage after the first. 4% additional. Why doesn't this say... I gotta be missing it, right? Why doesn't it say what the charge count is? I don't know. Maybe it'll say up here. Now has a maximum of 10 stages. Maybe it always had 10 stages. That's throwing me for a loop why it has it. It has this now has a maximum of 10 stages. Because that means that either it's changed or they're reminding us it has 10 stages. And if it used to have 20 stages and they reduced it down to 10 stages, I mean, I guess I could pop into the game real quick and figure it out, but I don't care enough. Either way, it got a pretty big damage buff, and Divine Ire was already strong. Just a little awkward to use, so not a lot of people use it, but it's very strong. Divine Ire is very strong. And then it's pumping up from 30% to 100, and I'm assuming it's cutting the stages in half, so this would be more, you know, a lot bigger. So it's not as big of a buff if it's cutting the stages in half. But it's not, if it's not cutting the stages in half, then that's a huge buff. And then the quality now provides 20% increased beam width. And everybody wants more beam width. People probably want more bean width too, because beans are delicious. You want a bigger bean, right? I mean, some girls might not like a bigger bean, but for the most part, a bigger bean's always better. Now, Energy Blade is interesting because it gives you 5% more maximum energy shield. Now, if that was 5% more health, that wouldn't be that interesting, but 5% more maximum energy shield can get stacked in so many different ways, and these percent more maximum energy shields are really nice to have on there because they kind of explode as you get a lot of energy shield. Going from 1,000 energy shield to 4,000 energy shield takes quite a bit more than from going to like 4,000 to 8,000. Or at least like when you start to scale it, it's an exponential scaling for each little benefit you get. So this 5% is going to look a lot bigger and feel a lot better than it actually does, especially considering that it's just replacing a 10% increased critical strike chance. And Energy Blade builds have always been almost good enough to use, but never quite good enough to use. And with the Trickster having a bunch of energy shield and a bunch of shenanigans going on, Energy Blade might actually be viable with this tiny little change. I should have deleted that. I just want to call it out because it's a more significant change, but that's probably not going to make that much of a difference. Now, Fireball, on the other hand, I always like using Fireball. Fireball reminds me of like old school classic Diablo 1, Diablo 2. It just feels like an old school ARPG skill. And they have buffed the range on it, the explosion size. So it used to have a maximum of a 1 meter, and now it's 1.4 meter. And the quality increases that by 0.2. So you're going to be at 1.6 meters at level 20. And then that's going to increase as you level that up. So you're going to be able to get some really good shotguns with Cyclone now when you use multiple projectiles. And also, if you're just going to be doing one single fireball like a madman, you'll be able to get some big AoE explosions on that. And Fireball's always been fun. I've always liked Fireball. And Fireball with big AoE, that's great. This is a good change. And it's not going to change the damage, so this is not going to be any stronger. Well, I guess it changes the damage a little if you can get extra shotguns. But for just a single Fireball, it's not really going to change the damage, but it is going to change the quality of life. And a skill like Fireball, where it just shoots a single projectile that hits something and explodes, that explosion should be pretty big. It should be a pretty damn big explosion, almost like the size of a Nova, in my opinion. The only reason they don't is probably because the shotgunning. Now, Flame Blast, I put on here for +1 to maximum stages simply because I like Flame Blast. I like Flame Blast a lot, and I think Flame Blast is one of the best skills to use for Ignite builds. And having +1 to maximum stages is going to give you that much bigger of an Ignite, and that's really nice. Flame Scourge has 20% more damage with hits against burning enemies instead of 10% increased cast speed. That is a 20% more damage buff for Flame Scourge. Now, I've always liked using Flame Scourge when I use Righteous Fire on single targets because I don't really like fire traps. So this is a big deal for me if I'm going to be doing Righteous Fire, because this is probably going to be my secondary skill with that 20% more damage against burning enemies. And that also goes into Flamethrower Trap. I don't like Fire Trap. Flamethrower Trap is awesome, however, but it has that cooldown on it, and the cooldown is pretty big. But getting this 20% increased cooldown recovery rate might actually put Flamethrower Trap as a viable trap option. And you can also do double traps where you Fire Trap and Flamethrower Trap. The Flamethrower Trap, to me, is just far more cool skill. You see it. It's more tactile when you use it. Spins around. It's awesome. Yeah, so that's a good option. Now, Frenzy got a big boy buff right here. Now provides 2% more attack, damage, and attack speed per Frenzy charge, instead of 10% increased attack speed. I think Frenzy is on the table for a meta build now. You'll probably have to do some convert element nonsense, probably pretty similar to how they run like Frost Blades or something like that, and use a Heat Shiver, which has been nerfed but still pretty strong, or something like that. Or you can just do any other build, but you can try to do like a Poison Frenzy build using the Snake Gloves, because you're going to be getting a lot of extra attack damage and attack speed is good for Poison. Either way, people have been able to get 10 Frenzy charges very easily, which does 20% more attack damage and 20% more attack speed total. That to me seems very powerful. If you can get a 10 Frenzy build, you go even higher than that, and you're obviously just going to be adding to it. And some of these Frenzy items, like the boots, they're always 1C, and it's extremely good. Glacial Cascade. Now, quality now causes the final burst to deal 50% more damage instead of providing 20% increased damage. Now, that 50% more damage on the final burst screams to me cold to fire, convert, ignite. That's just what it's screaming to me. 50% more damage on the final burst, hitting an ignite with that burst, and there you go. So Glacial Cascade, convert to ignite. It's a build. Someone do it. It won't be me. A Ground Slam. Quality now causes the skill to deal up to 20% more damage with hits to close targets instead of providing 10% increased area of effect and 20% increased stun duration. That is just a 20% more damage multiplier to Ground Slam for single target. Yeah. And then pretty much 20% multiplier for Heavy Strike as well. 20% chance to deal double damage with Heavy Strike. Biggity bam. Now that's not as good as 20% more damage to close targets with Ground Slam, because you can get triple strike sometimes, or you can get other ways to deal double damage, but it's pretty close. I mean, you're not likely to have double damage up at all times unless you're doing that specifically, but if you are doing that specifically, the benefit is now a moot point. But for the most part, that's a 20% more to multiplier for Heavy Strike. Herald of Thunder. Storm has a 20% increased frequency. Now, I built an auto bomber, not a real one. I just threw together a quick little auto bomber to get a feel for the playstyle. And this 20% increased frequency would really help the auto bomber for bossing and for mapping. I think the Herald of Lightning auto bomber has had a pretty big improvement with this, and we might be seeing more of those next league, depending on a lot of the stuff that's added with the league mechanics. A lot of the new league mechanics might add some very interesting stuff, and having this 20% increased frequency is a very nice bonus. Herald of Nova just got a giant damage boost. I'm assuming we don't really need to wait for the gym notes, because I think if any of the gym changes, they would have put in here because of the Ice Nova. There hasn't been that many gyms that got a damage boost in these patch notes, but Ice Nova definitely did. So Ice Nova no longer has 20% less area of effect when cast on Frostbolt or adds cold damage against chilled enemy. It also can no longer expand from up to 2 Frostbolt projectiles. So they're nerfing the Frostbolt Ice Nova interaction just a bit there. This is going to be for self-casting Ice Nova people. This is who they're trying to buff this for. Nova now deals a buff here, and then at level 20, it's going up from... Wait, where are the two things? Oh, right here. Up to 1,481 from 1,130. Sorry, I got a text there, so my brain kind of zoned out. And then it's also getting an added effective damage of 230% from 190. That is a big upgrade in added effective damage. And then the quality now adds radius, which is going to be better than area of effect. This is going to be the base radius, so area of effect, it's going to kind of snowball a little bit more. That's a double buff for Ice Nova. So anyone wants to do a hard cast Ice Nova, I mean, you got some pretty good reasons to do it here. A double damage buff from added effectiveness of damage and the flat damage that it adds, plus radius. Double damage plus AoE buff. Ice Nova's looking pretty good. Incinerate, 2 more stages. Every stage you get of Incinerate increases its power by, I think, 20%, 25%. Let's put it in here. Incinerate. 25% more damage with hits and ailments for each stage. Has a maximum of 10 stages. I mean, 8 stages. So this is going to turn into a maximum of 10 stages. So that's going to be a 50% more damage multiplier at that final stage. And Incinerate is good with Ignite because the final hit always ignites. So you're going to have 10 stacks and do a 10 stack Ignite. If you want to do a casting, channeling, Ignite build, Incinerate just got way more powerful. Kinetic Bolt. Quality now causes increases and reduction to spell damage to also apply to attacks from skills at 50% of their value. So this is going to be very good for all those strength stackers out there that are using General's Cry. You're going to be able to use Spell Cry, not General's Cry, yeah, Battle Mage's Cry, Strength, Turn Strike to do damage to spells, have that spell damage then apply to here, get those cluster jewels that increase spell damage. Kinetic Bolt got a pretty big upgrade for those players. Lightning Conduit was already pretty strong in certain situations, and now it just got more strong with 4% more damage with hits per 5% shock effect on enemies instead of 20% increased damage. Not sure how strong that's going to be, but if you just have 50% shock on it and then 4% damage per 5, that's going to be a pretty damn big bonus right there. And then if you stack that shock effect up even higher, say 75, or you use that bow that knocks it all the way up to 90, I think that Lightning Conduit is going to be pretty powerful in that situation if you can apply those shocks that big. And you can also pair that with Lightning Tendrils, and Lightning Tendrils is already really good. And now they got a 40% crit multiplier instead of 20% increased damage. That is going to be a pretty big bonus for a lot of builds that do crit multi. Assassin primarily is going to be really beneficial to this, but the Elementalist is also going to be extremely beneficial to this because the Elementalist has more difficulty getting crit multi in comparison to the Assassin. But the Assassin is so easy to get 100% crit on spells that he might benefit a little bit more. Either way, that's going to be great for anyone who's doing crit. And Lightning Tendrils feels good, plays good, does good damage. It's just a solid spell. Little, I wouldn't say underlooked, but with this 40% crit multi, I think it'll get a little bit more play. I think it's about accurately placed if you like Google builds. There's a few people doing it. It's not quite meta. It's not quite good enough for any meta material, but it is good enough to T16 around and have a good time. Now, Molten Strike, on the other hand, I think is meta level. People just aren't quite using it as much as other builds. But a couple variations of Molten Strike using all that return projectile and bouncy stuff is really nice. And this quality now causes projectiles to deal 10% more damage with hits and ailment instead of 20% increased fire damage. So you have multiple projectiles that are getting this 10% more damage with hits and ailments. And if you're doing a poison converter, you're getting way more poisons. If you're doing just regular fire damage, it's probably a little bit less. But either way, Molten Strike was already good. I really like the Claw Shield Molten Strikes. Very good movement speed, very good attack speed. There's a YouTuber, Anti-Meta Builds, who has a pretty good build on the Molten Strikes. I don't know if he did Poison or the Fire. I think he's done them both, actually. And yeah, I would recommend his channel if you want a Molten Strike Shield Claw build. Now, Perforate, I've always wanted to use. I really like the skill, but I just felt it didn't do enough damage. So I just think this is a cute little pretend buff for Perforate. It's still not going to be useful. I don't think anyone's going to use it except for maybe me. I think I might like a Perforate starter. I mean, Perforate automatically hits the enemies. You run through, it'll be nice and easy, nice and smooth. But the problem with it using it as a starter, the only way to get those +2 spikes is for quality, and you're not going to be able to get quality that easy starting out because those gem cutters are a little rare. I think that's what they call them. Upgrade your gem levels. But that is way better than 10% increased area of effect because now you don't have to shift. You no longer have to shift between stances to get that +2 spikes. You just get it from quality. So you have it all the time and you don't need to put on blood and sand or anything like that. But it did get a nice little buff At level 20, it used to do 213% effectiveness of damage, and now it's 265. Pretty big buff. Still not going to be usable, I don't think. They need to rework all of Melee. But I did want to call it out, because if there's any sad Melee players out there that, you know, looking for something that maybe they can do, even though it's not true Melee. Actually, I don't even know if it is considered Melee, but it's just an attack build. Anyone look for an attack build, there you go. Now, Power Siphon, the quality now provides 10% crit multiplier per power charge instead of 20% increased damage. That is insane. Now fires projectiles at 4 to 7 enemies instead of firing 4 to 7 additional projectiles. I don't exactly know what that means, but I think that means auto-targeting. Either that means auto-targeting or it only fires a projectile at an enemy, meaning that if you cast it and there's no enemy around, it won't fire any projectiles. Well, it'll only fire 4. And I don't know exactly what it means. I'm just like ranting right now. It's Friday night. You know what I'm talking about. Quality providing 10% increased critical strike multiplier per power charge is bonkers to me. That's just an easy 100% crit multi that you kind of just get for using Power Siphon, because everyone can get to 10 power charges. You can get way higher than that. I think I've seen like 14 or 15. Yeah, that's bonkers. This is definitely like right on the cusp of being my starter. Power Siphon, Assassin, really fast, get the league going super quick and easy, super cheap to gear. I want to highlight Puncture, just, you know, RIP to all the bleed builds out there, but it got a 20% more damage multiplier with bleeding for the quality, and that's a lot of more. The Puncture Bow Gladiator, the Puncture Bow Champion, they feel really nice to play. Their single target is kind of trash, and this 20% more damage is just, it's going to add a little bit to it. So if you really like the playstyle, you're going to be very excited about this change. Any Puncture players out there, very excited about this change. I cannot believe this is in here. Reap is already an S tier skill. In terms of damage, this is an S tier skill. Reap does so much damage. It is absolutely insane. And they just gave it a buff. I mean, it has this just massive physical damage to it. And then you get 5 blood charges. Players can have a maximum of 5 blood charges. And this does 5% more damage per blood charge. That's 25% more damage. Reap just got a 25% more damage buff. If you want a skill that's going to kill everything at the league start, Reap is what you pick. It's also really easy to play around because of the life regeneration. And then we also got a bunch of life regeneration nodes. So a max life, let's actually open up the presser. Let's open up the PoE. I think I just go to PoE.com, right? What the hell is that? All right, I'll go to Google. Affliction. Let's maximize this. Content reveal. I think that's, no. Where do I even want to go? Trailer, content, announcement. There we go. This is where I want to be. Let us scroll down. I think it's the first one to this guy right here. No, that's the tincture one. This guy right here. Skills cost life instead of mana. Reap already does that. Skills reserve mana instead of life. Remove all mana. 50% increase mana efficiency of skills. Then you go up this way. Spells you cast yourself gain added physical damage equal to 75% of your life cost if life cost is not higher than the maximum you could spend. That plus Reap is going to be absolutely huge. You're going to be able to do some crazy stuff with life stackers, and we don't even know what these two do yet. Once we know what these two do, this could be pretty yoked. It's going to be pretty yoked. Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this. I think I'm gonna do a lot of life stack and stuff this league. This looks really nice. I don't really know what any of this stuff does, but the life stacking aspects look pretty great. You're gonna be able to get a bunch of life. And then they had that new skill that they added last league, which gives you a bunch of physical damage based on the damage of your main hand weapon. I forgot what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Add that in there. It's going to be real nice. Reeve is bonkers. Reeve was already the strongest attack skill in terms of quality of life and power. Reeve might be better for bossing. I mean, not Reeve. Blade Flurry might be better for bossing, but Reeve is not that far behind it. And with the quality of life and the ability to hit and move, Reeve probably beats it out. Like, Blade Flurry has better paper DPS, but Reeve probably has better real-world DPS. And getting this +2 to stages is going to be absolutely crazy. Because with regular Reeve, you already have 4 stages. Then you hit that Vol Reeve and you have 8. And you're going to be getting 2 more stages on top of that. For 10 stages of Reeve, your AoE is going to be bonkers. Your damage is going to be insane. Reeve is on the table. Reeve is meta. Reeve is in. There's so many ways to build it. You can build it poison. You can build it freaking elemental damage. You can even do straight physical. You can do impale. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with Reeve. It's a fantastic skill. Now, Righteous Fire I'm putting on here because I said I'm probably going to do a lot of life stack and stuff. And with the modifications to Righteous Fire, stacking life is probably going to be a really nice way to get a lot of Righteous Fire damage. And I'm kind of tired of Cluster Jewels. Cluster Jewels have been a little overplayed, so I don't really need to go into the Cluster Jewels to get that much life. And if I do, I don't really have to worry about rolling very difficult to get Cluster Jewels. I'll just have to get the Fettle for my small clusters to get a bunch of life. Or I can just do entire skill tree of life and not even worry about Cluster Jewels and just grab all those really tasty life nodes, or even do strength stacking. There's a lot you can do to get this Righteous Fire damage cooking instead of just adding dot multi and fire. I like Righteous Fire better when it's the damage burn aspect of it, not the flat damage. I think this is a positive change for the identity of Righteous Fire, because Righteous Fire was never really supposed to be a spell that twinky little elementalists can use. This was supposed to be a jug, a chieftain, a thick boy, heavy life, heavy armor type of thing. In fact, I think it should even probably scale with armor. I think they should do something with armor with Righteous Fire. Like when you have Righteous Fire, it increases your armor based on your life. I think that would be a great tag to add in here. But going on to the quality, it now providing 0.3 meters to radius is spectacular, because Righteous Fire already had a radius problem. Righteous Fire has a radius problem and a damage problem. And if you're going to fix one of them for Righteous Fire, I'd prefer them fix the radius problem than the damage problem. Because the damage problem you can mitigate through using a secondary skill like Fire Trap. But the whole point of Righteous Fire is to burn all the small stuff around you. So giving it a radius bonus is way better than giving it a damage bonus. Very good job with this change, in my opinion. Now, Pox is going to be mad. I guess he's probably not going to be mad about it, because then he can rebuild this site and get a bunch of new traffic from people that want to see his rebuilt site. But he did put a lot of work into his build, and it is a little sad when you put that much work into something and it gets changed. He has to rebuild it. It's more than just play something else, bro, because he just put so much effort into making the material for it. So it is like creating a bunch of work and then having to redo it. But anyone who's had a job, especially like programmers, you'll program a bunch of stuff and then they change directions and you just programmed a bunch of stuff for nothing. It happens. RIP. Rolling Magma. Skills now cause that skill to chain 2 times instead of 20% increased damage. Rolling Magma is already a fantastic skill. Having 2 more chains of this, oh, this is juicy. This is juicy. This is a juicy change. This right here is a gusher. This right here is going to explode so many times. It's going to be great. Highly recommend Rolling Magma for everyone. In fact, a Rolling Magma cock build would be very fun. Split Arrow. I love Split Arrow. It's neglected in terms of its damage. It's nowhere as good as Tornado Shot, but something about split arrow just hits me where it feels good. It feels good to play split arrow, so I really like it. It getting 4 more arrows, that's just champion. That's champion right there. Now you put on barrage support with those 4 more arrows, and it's going to give you a lot more boss damage. So if you want to try something that's different than tornado shot because you're tired of tornado shot, this change for split arrow is actually pretty huge. Sweep. I like sweep. I'm a big fan of sweep. I have a cyclone sweep build that I play a lot, and it getting more radius is spectacular. Cyclone, sweep, shockwave, Scion as my starter is definitely ringing into my head as what I'm going to pick for a starter, because I really like the Scion setup, and I really like the cyclone, shockwave, general's cry, sweep gameplay. So that just seems like a good idea to me. Now, Vigilant Strike. Who the hell would put Vigilant Strike on their interested gyms? What are they thinking? Well, I am primarily a melee player, and melee got no fundamental changes this league. Highly disappointed on my end. I'm still excited for the league, but I really was expecting some type of melee love. I was also expecting a gladiator rework. I really like the chieftain rework. I haven't really played much of the I don't even remember the Guardian rework, but everyone seems to like it. My brother played SRS on there and just slayed through the game. So those 2 reworks I thought were very nicely done. Let's ignore Flames Advance on the Chieftain. That one's trash. They fucked that up, but let's focus on the positive with those changes. And I was really hoping they would do the Gladiator, and I can see what their Gladiator rework would look like, what it would be like. And I didn't get that, and I didn't get any fundamental melee skill buffs, so I am a bit disappointed in that regard, simply because my expectations were not met. My expectations were out of whack. I mean, I don't know why I expected to fix melee, probably because it's been so weak for so long, but instead of fixing melee, they gave Reap a giant bonus. But you know, us melee players, we'll suffer through it. But anyways, Quality now provides 4% more attack damage per endurance charge. 4% more attack damage per endurance charge. Now, I don't know exactly how Vigilant Strike works because I haven't used Vigilant Strike, and I don't think anyone has used Vigilant Strike because what is Vigilant Strike? Or am I right? What is Vigilant Strike? I'm just messing around. I used it a while ago. I tried to make it work. One thing I don't remember is if it always eats your endurance charges. So attacks enemy with a powerful melee strike, granting fortification, reducing damage you take from hits. The cooldown can be expended by... The cooldown can be bypassed by expending an endurance charge requires a melee weapon. So I think if you don't have Fortify, it refreshes it and uses an endurance charge, but I cannot remember. So if this uses an endurance charge every time you attack, you need a pretty stable way to gain back those endurance charges. So I would think the Juggernaut would probably be the only class you'd really want to do this with. Maybe the Slayer and do Frenzy Charge stacking. But this 40% more attack damage per endurance charge. If you get 10 endurance charges, I'm saying 40, I mean 4% more attack damage per endurance charge. But if you have 10 endurance charges, that's 40% more attack damage on Vigilant Strike. And Vigilant Strike already has a 350% damage effectiveness. So Vigilant Strike could be good in 2 different ways. One, really big bongo hits on bosses with maximum endurance charges up and just racking them down. Or since it's the effectiveness of added damage, you can get really fast attack speed and then have that added damage. Now the downside of Vigilant Strike is that Bone Shatter exists, and I'm pretty sure Bone Shatter got a buff. Pretty sure they buffed Bone Shatter, and it exists. So why would you ever play Vigilant Strike? The only reason you play Vigilant Strike is because your videos are so boring and lame that you have to make meme videos in order to get attention. I don't know anyone like that. I don't know any YouTubers who try to be a clown on here. That's not my speed. That ain't me. That's someone else. All right, that's me. I'm probably going to do Vigilant Strike. All right, I'm going to do a Vigilant Strike, Endurance Charge build, because I want to see what this 40% more damage actually feels like end game. That is all. Those are all the gems that I found interesting in the patch notes. That was a much shorter video than I was expecting. I was expecting to hit the 55-hour mark, but I think I did that in 40 minutes. I'll check you guys later.